The most well-known psychological classification of needs was proposed by the American researcher Abraham Maslow. He identified the following. First and most important, physiological needs. The need for food, the need for drink, the need for air. Then goes the need for safety, both physical and psychological. Social needs, such as love and belonging to a group. Needs for respect and recognition, status and prestige. Last and the most diverse are spiritual needs. These include cognitive needs, the need to know, the need to understand, and the need to explore. Aesthetic needs, such as harmony, justice, and beauty. And self-actualization, the realization of one's abilities and the development of personality. Abraham Maslow, like any psychologist or philosopher, making generalizations at such a high level, relied primarily on his own understanding of the field being analyzed, also taking into account the opinions of colleagues and other similar considerations. But physiologists try to proceed in a more evidence-based way. Ideally, they first identify the nerve cells that are responsible for a particular need, and only then they say, yes, such a need truly exists. Only when neurons responsible for the emergence of hunger, maternal behavior, or the tendency toward empathy, only when they are found can it be considered finally proving that this need exists as a fundamental biological program. We will use the physiological classification of needs proposed by Pavel Vasilyevich Simonov. Simonov was an academician and a physiologist. Throughout his life, he worked at the intersection of psychology and physiology, and he formulated a number of interesting and original concepts in the field of needs, motivations, and emotions. He proposed dividing all biological needs into three types: vital, zoosocial, and self-development. Simonov's classification is physiological. It is based on data about the nerve centers of the brain and about the neurotransmitters that operate when we experience hunger, anxiety, joy, or aggression. The first group is vital needs. It comes from the word vita, meaning life. These are needs that are essential for life itself. Without their realization and satisfaction, our very existence becomes impossible. If they are not fulfilled, the organism will simply die. These needs include, first of all, feeding behavior and drinking behavior, as well as the need for safety, which manifests itself in defensive behavior. Analysis has shown that in our brain, there are separate centers associated with fear. These centers are activated when we satisfy the need for safety by running away, or at least hiding and remaining still. There are also separate centers responsible for actively defensive reactions, aggression, which become active when we attack the source of trouble. These are different neurons, although they are located close to each other in hypothalamus. In addition, vital needs include all the processes that occur in the organism so that it can function normally, maintaining a constant body temperature, blood pressure, breathing, sleep, and wakefulness, as well as the emptying of the intestines and the urinary bladder. This group also includes programs that allow us to conserve energy, the so-called programs of laziness. The group of vital needs also includes the so-called grooming, body care, combing, licking, and washing. The term grooming originally referred to the care of horses, but researchers who study animal behavior extended this concept to any kinds of body care. Of course, if a person does not wash, they will not die as quickly as they would without water or air. But eventually, they will still become covered with parasites and dirt and will perish. Therefore, washing and hygiene are very important. It is also important to understand that behind each of the expressions mentioned above, feeding behavior, actively defensive reactions, programs of energy conservation, and similar ones, there are in fact dozens and hundreds of behavioral programs characteristic of the human brain as well as the brains of birds, fish, and insects. It turns out that the enormous diversity of behavioral situation is based on the activity of certain nerve cells and nerve centers. In each group, we can see both very simple reactions, for example, swallowing and salivation, or simple elements of feeding behavior. But the behavior of a bee building honeycombs is a very complex, innate reaction. A spider weaving its web also activates a complicated program, and this program is also innate. All this variety of programs is extremely interesting to study. Even the study of a brain that is much simpler than ours, for example, the brain of a grape snail or an earthworm, provides a great deal of fundamentally important neurophysiological information. Once we understand this, we can study the human nervous system much more effectively. The second group of programs is zoosocial programs. It is easy to understand what this refers to because it has word social in it. These are programs connected with the interaction of individuals of the same species, intraspecies interaction. First of all, this includes reproduction. Reproduction is an extremely important task because if an organism does not leave offspring, then from the point of view of biology, its life has been in vain because its genes have not been passed on to the next generations. Reproduction is followed by care for offspring. These are also extremely important programs of maternal and child interaction. We also strive to take a leading position in the group. We want to occupy and defend territory. This type of need also includes the reaction of empathy, transferring to oneself the emotions experienced by another individual with the help of special mirror neurons. All these programs are innately embedded in the human brain. But of course, in the case of a particular brain, for each individual person, The importance of these programs is set differently. The installation parameters, if you can call it that way, depend on parental genes, the hormonal background, and individual experience. As a result, for some people, aggression becomes more important. For others, fear. For some, parental behavior. And for others, leadership. From this set arises the foundation of personality, including its temperament. Personality and temperament are, to a significant degree, determined by the basic configuration of how important each need is within a particular brain. People differ, among other things, because each individual and unique nervous system has different levels of various needs. All of this creates the diversity of our behavior and, to some extent, its unpredictability. The third group of needs identified by Pavel Simonov is needs of self-development. He wrote that these are needs that are directed towards the future. At the moment when you carry out the corresponding behavior, it is not very clear why you are doing it. But if you're a patient, then after an hour or perhaps after a week or a month, it becomes clear. So this is why this program exists and is carried out. The most obvious example of this class of programs is exploratory behavior, the gathering of new information. New information, just like food, safety, and care for offspring, brings pleasure to our brain. Exploratory behavior is a very important component of human life. The human brain is very curious and it experiences positive emotions when it learns something new, even if this knowledge will be needed only much later or may even turn out to be useless. Imitative behavior: do what a parent does, what a classmate does, do what the leader does. Here, mirror neurons operate repeating movements, although in a way different from the case of empathy. At the moment of repetition, we do not always know why we need it, but evolutionary experience shows that most likely this is a useful action. Programs of self-development also include programs connected with freedom, or as Ivan Pavlov wrote, with the reflex of freedom. We do not tolerate restrictions on freedom of movements, or at least tolerate them poorly. Our biological brain, looking into the future, says, fight, free yourself. Otherwise, you will die from hunger, thirst, or be killed by predators, and so on. Play behavior connected with movement and with the pleasure of movement. It also belongs to the needs of self-development. For example, a kitten runs after a piece of paper, and a young goat simply runs around. Why do they do this? They are training, because the kitten will later have to run after a mouse, and the young goat will have to run away from a wolf. The animals themselves do not know this, but their innate program knows it. This program forms their motor skills in advance. It trains them, and the training itself is again associated with positive emotions. Do not be surprised when some 3-year-old boy climbs onto a chair and jumps off the chair, climbs onto a chair and jumps off the chair again, and repeats this 50 times in a row. Why does he do this? Because it is pleasant for him, and at the same time his brain is being trained. The cerebellum forms motor skills. An adult already knows how to do this, and when a child suggests, let's jump, the adult brain may react with deep confusion. However, if a person has a brain with active play behavior, such a person will run and jump as well. By the way, there are such fortunate adults for whom any movement is truly meaningful. Even at respectable age, they continue to go hiking, dancing, roller skating, and so on.